Hi, everyone. Can you hear me? Okay, good. So I'd like to tell you a story about how a company who had a great team, an awesome product and customer experience, supportive investors, and customers who absolutely loved the brand skidded off the road of success. Yes, I'm here to represent the failed startup. And I applaud GeekWire and John Cook for giving airtime to those of us who didn't quite make it. Because if you haven't already been in a company that's failed to become a sustainable brand, I think it's fair for some of you in this room, you might. And so if this does happen to you, I'm here to validate that it's A-okay, you will survive. It's even a badge of honor. So I'd like to tell you a little bit about my experience, the lessons I learned along the way, and how I created what I felt was a graceful exit off the startup highway. So one of the, Rivet and Sway was one of the first eyewear brands exclusively for women. And it was founded by three men. The first was Steve Anderson, who was an investor out of Baseline Ventures in San Francisco. He was an early angel investor in Instagram and Twitter, so no slouch to investing. He joined forces with Scott Armstrong, who's a consumer products guru here in Seattle. He runs a company called Brent Haven. And they attracted John Lusk, who's a serial entrepreneur, and he became the first CEO. And Rivet and Sway was, the inspiration behind the company was to solve a problem. As John loved to say, buying eyewear sucks. It's time-consuming, expensive, and I can attest that buying a pair of glasses from your optometrist is not inspiring. It was also a great business opportunity. The 98% primarily offline eyewear industry had enjoyed astronomical margins for decades and was ripe for disintermediation. But what really interested me when I talked to John in the fall of 2011 was this opportunity to target a segment that had been underserved, and that segment was women. John's vision was to create a wholly unique and luxury brand experience that, with an authentic brand that would create an emotional connection with women. And that was really interesting to me. So I joined John as his partner, and my first role was VP of Product. I became CEO in July of 2013, and a year later, in June of 2014, when we announced the closure of the company, many people, most of all our customers, were shocked because we had, crossed many milestones, and our products and services were resonating with women. In fact, women loved Rivet and Sway. We delivered over 16,000, we served over 16,000 customers. We delivered over 26,000 trial and purchase orders. We were on a 1.4 million revenue run rate. We measured our customer satisfaction by Net Promoter Score. We were consistently above 90, which was amazing. And we were actually changing customer behavior. The average life cycle of buying a pair of glasses for most people is once every 2 years, but Rivet and Sway customers were buying 1.5 glasses in every order and coming back to repurchase within 6 months about 20% of the time. So we were doing really well. And we weren't the only ones drinking the Kool-Aid. We had raised $4.8 million from investors who believed in our team and believed in our vision to make buying glasses a delightful experience. So before I tell you about the factors that contributed to our downfall, I'd like to tell you a little bit about the insights I learned from what we did well. And one of the most important things I learned was the importance in investing in a brand. By and large, one of the most common comments I got about Rivet and Sway from customers and casual onlookers alike was how well executed our brand was. And it wasn't just our catchy company name and a well-designed logo. It was all the touch points of our customer experience. Our brand purpose was to make women more beautiful in glasses. And so that meant we wanted women to feel confident and sexy and beautiful. And so we reflected that in the photography that we directed. We wanted women to be able to express themselves with the range of styles and colors we had in our collection. And we wanted the process of buying glasses to be fun. So we intentionally integrated all these little details of delight and surprise along the way. So how do you know when your brand is working? Well, you know it's working when customers are taking pictures of your packaging and they're posting it on Instagram. You know that's working when customers are engaging and sharing your social media. And you know it's working when women are telling you how they feel when they experience your company. I knew we had made it when we started getting emails from customers who said, I feel more beautiful wearing a pair of Rivet and Sway glasses than when I'm not. So that's a great milestone. But building a brand like this takes a lot of time and a lot of money. And it's really an art. And if you're going to invest in this art, it really helps to have people who are skilled in the art of bringing great brands to life. I can tell you without a shadow of a doubt that we would not have been as successful without the great insights and contributions from people like Britt Stromberg and Henry Yu from States of Matter, Juliette Sandberg, who helped us with fashion direction, and Kathleen Ullman, her art director. So if you don't have anyone with brand experience in your company, find it. It's worth the investment. The other thing I learned was how much effort it takes to build a physical product. In my career to date, I'd spent in the digital world of e-commerce and software, and I never had this experience of actually designing and manufacturing physical products, and it takes a lot of time. And this may be an obvious point, but you really have to understand how much time that takes from your manufacturing lead time perspective. For eyewear, the cycle is a shocking 7 to 9 months. And the reason it's so long is there are a lot of steps involved. You have to come up with your product plan. You've got to iterate through designs and materials and colors. Then you build a set of prototypes that you work with your manufacturers. In our case, it was in China. And then you build what's called a color set, which is your prototypes in each colors that you selected. And once you've done all that, which each of those steps can take 4 to 6 weeks, you place your order and you wait another 4 to 5 months to get your glasses. So if you make a mistake in the product development process, you're kind of screwed. It takes a long time to fix it. And when we launched our first collection in August of 2012. We were so excited to launch, we forgot that we had to start the next collection. So we didn't start till January of 2013, that meant we didn't launch new product for an entire year, which was way too late. Now, fortunately, we figured that out, and we got into a cycle of developing product that we could release every 3 months, which we learned was a great tool for driving demand. But if we had known a little bit and planned a little bit better up front about planning that manufacturing life cycle, we could have gotten on that track much faster. The third thing I learned that something that we did particularly well was customer focus. And this was a value that I learned at Amazon. And it's well documented, Amazon's commitment to customer focus. It was drilled down in everyone from the top. Everyone knew the pillars of customer value we're trying to optimize: price, selection, availability. Everyone went through customer service training. We worked in the distribution centers. Voice of the customer was part of weekly metrics meetings. And there, of course, was lots of customer data to mine for clues on what we could innovate. But customer focus is not something you can put on a poster and put on the wall and have it actually be executed in your company. It has to be reflected in the behavior you model as a leader and what you prioritize. And you have to have intention in empowering employees to take their own initiative to act on behalf of your customers. One of the ways in which John and I were very aligned from the very beginning is we both felt it was very important to develop customer focus in our company culture. And John really set the stage early on by investing a lot of time in talking to our customers. In fact, he called absolutely every single customer that purchased a pair of Rivet and Sway glasses in the beginning. And while this isn't a scalable tactic as you grow, it set the example for what he felt was important. We also celebrated opportunities when, or situations when employees actually took initiative to help customers. I remember one time I got this handwritten thank you note from a customer, and it said, "Dear Rivet and Sway, thanks so much for the doggy treats. My dog loves them." I was like, what's this all about? So I went and talked to Carl Shaw, who was our operations manager. I said, what's this all about? He goes, oh yeah, that's the woman whose dog ate her specs. And so when I sent her the replacement pair for free, I threw in a bag of doggy treats. And Carl did that kind of stuff all the time. We got a customer who called in a panic that she couldn't return her home try-on order because she'd just been in an accident. So he sent her flowers to her hospital room. He would deliver frames to people if they were like heading out on a trip and he needed them right away. He would like deliver them to their house if they lived in Seattle. So those kinds of activities you have to sort of encourage and celebrate. And so if you want customer focus, you have to live it, instrument to it, and hire for it. Now, what are some of the things where we didn't quite hit the mark? This was one of the first big problems that we had, was that we didn't get big fast. And when you have limited funds, it's really hard to balance those competing challenges of being frugal but also being aggressive to drive growth. This is our sales growth from July of 2012, just before our launch, to April of 2014. And you can see for the first year, we sort of stumbled along at just under 20%, $20,000 in revenue for that entire first year. And if you're spending fixed costs on a monthly basis and you're driving only 5% month-over-month revenue growth, that is not a good situation. And what was going on here is that we thought we were being really smart by being frugal. But I think maybe in some dimensions we were just being cheap. We overly emphasized being efficient. We would do a tiny experiment, and if it didn't work, we would move on to something else. We kept expecting that that word of mouth would take off and we would grow organically, but it turns out you need a certain volume for that tipping point to happen. And then some tactics just take time and faith to work, like content development for SEO or PR. In this whole time frame, we cycled through 4 PR firms. We would hire a firm and hire them for 3 months and see what kind of traffic they could drive. And if we weren't satisfied, we'd fire them and move on to the next. It just doesn't work that way. So while we did finally figure it out and we made some aggressive changes starting in July of 2013, this growth curve needed to be 12 months earlier. The second point comes down to a business fundamentals. Can you actually acquire customers effectively with a reasonable payback period? And in our case, we had a really hard time doing that. Our gross margin was about 60%, so for every order we would take home about 110 in gross profit. But in all this time, we never got the cost of acquisition below $100. And in this chart, the light blue, there's 2 parts of our customer acquisition, or CAC. The light blue part is our pure marketing expense, and most of that was online advertising. The dark blue part were our physical costs from home try-on. Now, during this time period, from June of 2013, when we started being more aggressive, to March of 2014, we did a really good job in focusing on our CAC and trying to bring it down. But we really could only gain that efficiency in the marketing spend. It was really hard to change that physical cost of the home try-on program. So why were we committed to the physical home try-on? Well, we felt very strongly, and our customers affirmed, that women needed to try on glasses in order to buy a pair, because most women who typically bought glasses once every 2 years, they had no idea what size or style would look good on them. So we really needed to have this program, but it was really hard to drive efficiencies, and really the only way to get efficiencies on that spend was to drive conversion. And we finally eventually figured out how to change our pricing and to drive more units per order and get people to come back and purchase without a home try-on, but it happened just a little bit too late. So this was one of our key problems. This is another key insight that was especially important for me. Don't make your strategy your religion. So our vision was to make women more beautiful in glasses and deliver a delightful experience. That was our North Star, and that was totally appropriate. Our strategy was the combination of the 4 Ps, right? Product, promotion, positioning, and price? No, you know what I'm saying. Placement. But that's just a hypothesis of what's going to appeal to your customers. We had had some like Bible-thumping faith in that initial strategy that we created. And it turns out that our strategy wasn't necessarily wrong, but it also wasn't 100% right. For example, we really thought that women wanted and what would appeal to them is a high-end luxury experience at a $199 price point that signals quality and value. And we were really thoughtful about all the details that would support that luxury experience. But we underestimated the perceived discount that customers would need to jump the divide from offline to online. And some things like virtual try-on solution, I was really adamantly opposed to it because I thought our customers wouldn't like the experience, but we never really tested it. And then other features like free 2-day FedEx shipping for all orders was something that added to cost but not to conversion. So we just didn't test early enough and fast enough because we were really passionate about that strategy. And I think one of the things that I learned was if you have really strongly held beliefs in your strategy, it needs to be validated by your customers. And the only way you get that validation is to experiment early and often and be willing to adapt. Now, I was a first-time startup CEO, and I had never been in a sales or business development role. So fundraising was by far the most intimidating part of my role as CEO. And if you're in this situation, one thing I will tell you is that fundraising and talking to investors is not nearly as bad as it seems. I, by and large, had amazing conversations with investors. They asked me hard questions, but they had really great input, and I really felt that they gave us credit for what we did well and challenged us on some key assumptions that was actually really helpful. But the other thing I learned was that fundraising cycles have distinct expectations for each level of fundraising, and it's really important to time those expectations with your company performance. This is a history of our fundraising. We started the company with about $300,000 in seed funding from Steve, and in that first 6 months, John, the CEO, had crossed off a lot of key milestones. He had built a website, he had fulfilled some orders, he had set up supplier relationships, he had built the initial brand, and so he and Steve were able to raise $1 million in January of 2012, which is when I joined the company. So we were off to a pretty good start. And then by fall of 2012, we started fundraising again. And we talked to lots of different investors, and then we were eventually able to raise $2 million from a combination of current and new investors. And at that point, we were generating $20,000 in monthly revenue with a cost of acquisition of $275. So it was still early days, and we had a lot of promise, and that was a relatively easy hurdle. But then in the fall of 2013, we'd now raised $3.3 million. We were doing $75,000 a month in revenue, and we had a cost of acquisition of $200. At this point, when we started talking to investors, we didn't get as warm a reception because we'd already raised 3.3, we were trying to raise another 4, and we just weren't quite hitting it out of the park. And so the feedback we got was, you have to focus on growth and bring down that cost of acquisition. But we were running out of cash, so we negotiated a $1.5 million bridge from our existing investors in December of 2013. Okay, at this point, we were pulling out all the stops. We were changing our pricing. We updated our packaging. We changed our home try-on program. We were actually hitting our sales revenue goals, and we were doing a really great job. But then by this March-April time, when we started going out to investors again, we wanted to raise $6 million, but we had raised 4.8 already. And at this point, we were raising $100,000. We were doing $100,000 a month and $150 in CAC. It just didn't make sense. And my favorite quote was from Scott Jacobson, who's a friend of mine, and he meant this in the nicest way, but he said, "Sarah, don't give me too much to believe." And so in May of 2014, we were facing a wall. So what do you do if you get in a situation, you're running out of cash and options are sort of being closed off one by one? Well, for me, I wanted to figure out how to wind down the company in the most graceful way possible. And I had a couple of principles that I lived by. The first was to honor my team and my investors, and for my own personal sanity, I really felt like I was pursuing every possible option. And so I pitched pivots to our business model. I tried going back to our current investors for recapitalization of the company. I tried to find a buyer and had many conversations, but no one took the bait. I even really seriously considered cutting our burn a ton, firing most of our staff, bringing into my basement, cutting our marketing spend, and just sort of waiting it out. But in the end, I didn't really see a pathway to success, and so after conferring with investors, I decided to wind down the company. So my next priority was to protect my team. And as you heard earlier in the panel that we just heard, the importance of transparency. For me, my approach was, part of protecting my team was that I didn't want them to be blindsided. So I was really transparent about the process and what was going on the entire time. And this was risky, because if you tell your team a little bit too much too early, they could jump ship, and you're trying to figure out how to make things work. I really needed to pull out the stops and have every person give it their 110%. But I really believe that transparency breeds trust, and trust breeds motivation, and motivation delivers results. So the approach that worked well for me was keep my team informed. So everyone in the fall of 2013 knew exactly when we were going to run out of money, and I was keeping them informed of exactly what I was doing to try to prevent that from happening. When we actually made the decision to wind down the company then, it turns out that you can't actually give severance to employees if you owe a lot of other people money. So I did the best I could to when we made the announcement, to give our employees as long as possible. And virtually everyone stayed with the company till the very end. And I'm so appreciative for their loyalty. I also thought it was really important to honor commitments to customers, and so we fulfilled every last customer order. We accepted every free return. And I was handling customer inquiries and requests through April, July and August. But I felt that was really important to honor the legacy of the customer experience that we had committed to. I also thought it was really important to pay back my debts as much as possible. And you remember that 1.5 million bridge? This was from investors who had been with us from the very beginning. And so I went and found a buyer for our assets, and you can still find Rivet and Sway glasses on glasses.com. And that little bit of capital helped me pay off and negotiate settlements with our vendors. And then I was able to return what I felt was a meaningful amount to our investors, which I feel really proud about. The next thing is just, when you have to make the decision, don't drag it out. Be brave to make that decision and tell your team. And that was a really hard day. No one in the room was surprised, because we've been talking about that possibility, but it was hard, the finality of deciding that the Rivet and Sway brand would no longer continue the way that we intended. So you just have to be brave and rip off the Band-Aid. And the last thing is to celebrate. I wrote a personal thank you to every one of our employees, and we threw a big party. And we talked about all the things we loved about Rivet and Sway, and it provided some really nice closure. And it's important to recognize that everyone gives their 110%, and you've done a lot of amazing things, even though you can't continue as a company. So celebrate that and really take pride in all that you've done. So after all that, I'm sure the question that you're on the edge of your seats wanting to ask, would I do it again? In a heartbeat. Thanks for listening to my story.
Thanks, Sarah. Thank you so much.